One cool mechanic in Shroom and Gloom is that it is a dual deck builder. What this means in practice is that you have one deck for combat, but also one deck for exploration. This is a great idea as both decks require completely different decisions and strategy. Now, one deck will of course be how do you synergize and make the most out of your cards to do the most damage, but also sustain the most damage, whilst the other deck will be all about how to get the most out of exploring. Now, with the exploration deck, do you want to build a deck all about getting as many keys as possible, or maybe it's as many camps or as health as possible? Do you find ways to feed your exploration deck into your combat deck? Now, these are just a few things that you can think about when it comes to building that exploration deck alongside your combat deck. Now, this one mechanic adds so much to the roguelike deck building genre that I just had to point it out. One cool mechanic in Blackjack is how the betting system works. Blackjack is just straight up blackjack with a few extra rules tacked on. You are still trying to place cards to get you up to as close to 21 as possible, but not over. But the rules around betting make for an even more tense and interesting experience. So you start off every round by placing a bet from your own personal pot, or your winner's pot you have gained from previous victories. The aim of the game is to take all of the opponent's personal money. Once they are at zero, they are defeated, but likewise, once you lose all your money, your run is completely over. Alongside having to place a bet at the start of every round, so if you keep losing rounds, you'll eventually run out of money, there are a few things that the game does which can make you win or lose even more money. The first thing is the amount of cards you play, or just where you place your cards. The final two card slots have a cost to placing cards there, but they do have a benefit. Additionally, if you are fishing for that one card to win you a round and you happen to get one that puts you over 21, then you can hide the card in your sleeve, which has an increasing cost every time you use it. Finally, there are plenty of cards and abilities which you or your opponent can use to increase or even decrease your bets. The point is, all of these options massively increase the complexity of decision making in Blackjack, and most importantly, up the tension in a significant way. This game only has a demo out at the moment, but it's already one of my most anticipated indie games for next year. One cool mechanic in Dungeon Clawler is the Claw Machine. Dungeon Clawler is a roguelike deck builder where all your actions are dictated by what you pull from the Claw Machine. If you pull a sword, you do damage. If you pull a shield, you protect yourself from damage on the enemy's turn. However, what's really cool is how the game really uses the Claw Machine. For example, there's one item which is a stone brick, and every metal item close to it is buffed. There's another item which adds useless fluff to the machine every time you use it. There's also enemies which increase the size of certain items every time they are left alive to make it harder to grab what you need. The placement of items in the Claw Machine is actually really important. The grabbing itself as well can also be a real nail biter, as you might just need that one shield or that one sword to save you, and it lands right outside the goal zone. There are many ways to do randomness in games, cards, dice, or just RNG, but I've never seen a game say to the player, hey, if you can see it, you can grab it. It really is a cool mechanic. One cool mechanic in Armello is the win condition. Armello is a digital tabletop game where the aim is to be crowned the king in one of two ways. Either the king dies of natural causes, or you kill the king. The catch is, each turn the king loses health. If you make a beeline for the king at the start, you will most likely perish due to the amount of health he has. This creates a very tense atmosphere between players. Who is going to strike first? Will someone take a punt on killing the king whilst they have 5 health, 4 health, 3 health? This really encourages the players to keep track of what every other player is doing each turn, making sure they aren't getting too powerful, and if they are, try to sabotage them or beat them to the punch and kill the king before they do. This very simple mechanic, which essentially ticks down a variable each turn, adds so much more value to the game compared to the amount of time it would have taken to implement it, which is why it makes it such a cool mechanic. One cool mechanic in Monster Train 2 is how the train works. It can sometimes be a struggle for digital card games to get new players thinking multiple turns ahead, but the train itself is a great way that the game helps the player do this. The way the train works is that monsters enter the train at the bottom level, and at the end of every turn, if the monster is still alive, they will move up a level on the train. The player can place units on any level of the train at any point, and as they know that monsters will move up a level at the end of every turn, this is a great visual aid to allow them to plan ahead. They might start off with placing units to keep monsters busy at the bottom levels of the train, and use special units as almost like a trap near the top, for example. On top of this, the player's health is located at the top of the train. If the monster gets to the same level as the health, they will start doing damage to it, further motivating the player to think strategically about where and when they place their units. The lesson to take away from Monster Train 2 is that if you're struggling to get the player behavior that you want, try to visualize it for them. One cool mechanic in Nutmeg is the way the deck building and card playing works. Nutmeg is a deck building football game where your team and actions determine your tactical deck, which are the cards you play throughout the match. Every turn you click the event deck to see what the next scenario on the field is, then you play cards from your hand, which are cards from your tactical deck to influence the chances and successes of that scenario. The cards shown to the right of the players are the potential outcomes, and depending which cards you play, those outcomes increase or decrease in likelihood. The best part about this system is the stamina system. You might think that the numbers in the top right of the player cards are their rating, which is sort of true, but what is actually the case is that it's a stamina rating. Each card you play costs stamina. The better the card, the more stamina it costs. So yeah, the higher the stamina of the player, essentially the more good cards you can play on them. This stamina system, coupled with the fact that if you don't get the right type of cards, you can influence the game, makes every decision really meaningful. One cool mechanic in Debugging Hero is the debug tool, which allows you to change the stats of yourself and enemies. Anyone familiar with game devs knows about a debug tool, a tool used to change variables in the game to test out different features. The way this game allows you to change variables is through variable cards. On the fly, mid-fight, you can access these cards, target enemies or yourself, and add or subtract stats to make you or your enemies stronger or weaker. Adding deck building to a dungeon crawler isn't really something new, but the way this game incorporates a really fun idea with on-the-fly card playing is really cool, and contextualizing it around the player feeling like they are actually going into the game's code and manipulating it is really interesting.